Thank you. Welcome all to our worship service at Central Unitarian Church. My name is Josef, Machac, back with you as your worship associate after a long break since last summer. With that in mind, please forgive me if at any moment I go off script in a moment of abstraction. My wife and I first came to CUC 33 years ago at the invitation of our friends and neighbors who were already CUC members for a long time. We have been coming to CUC regularly since then, along with our daughters who grew up in our RE program and were eventually married to their spouses by Unitarian ministers. My wife and I continue to be deeply involved in multiple CUC activities. So again, welcome newcomers, members, and friends to our worship service at Central Unitarian Church. CUC is an inclusive community of all ages which embraces diversity in identity, expression, and spiritual belief. Many of our members and friends find inspiration, hope, and renewal with us. I'm sure that you will find our service today quite meaningful. Please be sure to say hello to one of our welcome hosts, John Whelan and Susan Springstead. Can you wave your hands so everybody can see you? Thank you. If you are visiting us online, please be sure to click the link provided in the chat and sign our guest book by providing us with your name and contact information. We are grateful for all those making today's service happen, particularly our minister, the Reverend Andrée, Cornelia. Music is provided by our musical guest, Mr. Michael Caldwell. It is made possible by our sound technical team, Phil Sosinsky and John Freund. We invite you to stay after service for coffee, conversation, and connection in the same space. As we prepare to begin our service this morning, we ask those in person to please silence your electronic devices, your cell phones, faxes, printers, and podcasts, and other sources of disinformation. I would like to bring to your attention some announcements. Our annual outreach auction began yesterday, December 7th. This is our annual opportunity to financially support local community organizations who provide valuable services to residents of Bergen County. Some of us are in fact involved in those organizations. See your email for details on how to access the auction website. If you have any questions, please see Jeff Merrigan. Thank you. It is also time to order poinsettias, which will be used to decorate our space for our Christmas Eve service and can be then taken home after service. 2 sizes are available, and your poinsettia can be purchased in honor of our loved one. Please see details in this week's newsletter. The deadline to order is this Tuesday, December 10th. Next, the annual CUC Holiday Craft Fair will be held today following service here at the clubhouse, and you can already see that in progress. Please stay after service for a festive afternoon of craft making and fun. We'll share some details at the end of service and how to transform this worship space into our crafting space. Join us the evening of Friday, December 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the clubhouse right here as we create our winter spiral. Transforming the space for this service takes many hands. We'll have food and sweets while we work together. All are welcome. The following evening, on Saturday, December 21st, from 5 to 7 p.m., we will be hosting an open house for people in the community to take a meditative walk in our winter spiral. We will also offer cookies and hot cider. Please spread the word and invite others to join us for this Saturday open house, as well as our annual Winter Spiral Sunday service the next day, celebrating the winter solstice taking place on the following Sunday, December 22nd. Lastly, I would like to bring to your attention the fact that on Friday, December 6th, most Christians outside of the Anglo-Saxon world celebrated the festival and feast of St. Nicholas or Santa Claus. St. Nicholas, an early Christian bishop in what is now Turkey, performed many good deeds and reported miracles that earned him his sainthood. St. Nicholas or Santa Claus has in fact nothing to do with Christmas for most Christians outside of North America and Britain. And I remember fondly my childhood celebrating that early winter holiday. Please see me after service if you wish to find out about how this delightful holiday is celebrated. And I would like to invite here Miss Elizabeth Stewart for one more announcement.
Good morning, everybody. As you know, once again, we are having a gifting tree, which is in the back of the room. And this is basically, we work through the Westwood Cares organization to give to people who are disabled, elderly, people who have fallen through the cracks, shall we say, because they have like maybe $1 more than necessary and can't get the welfare funds that are necessary. This is the group that we are gifting to with our tree. So in the back, on the tree, are pink name tags. So what you can do is take a name tag, or 2, or 3, and buy a gift. There's no monetary restrictions at all. And gift cards are greatly appreciated, particularly Trader Joe's and Stop and Shop, because everybody can walk from Westwood to one of those stores. But the Visa cards, MasterCard gifts are great. Or warm accessories, gloves, hats, scarves, some blankets. So you take your gift tag, get your gift, and put the gift into a bag. Do not wrap it, though, because for security's sake, they don't want to see whatever is in whatever gift is being given. So, and then bring it back to church, attach that gift tag also to the handle of the gift bag, and bring it back to church, and we have to have them back by next Sunday. I know there's a short time frame, but these tags had a hard time getting out. Or you can bring them into the office also during the week, but make sure you call Maxwell first to make sure she's there, because sometimes she might be out and whatever, might not be accessible. So please, after the service, grab a tag and find a nice gift for the person on the tag. Thank you.
And now, let us more formally begin our gathering. Please turn to a person near you and offer them a warm welcome.
We put it on TV this morning, but we couldn't.
Our opening words this morning are by Elena Westbrook. In a world ravaged by violence, by hatred, by conflicts that seem eternal and insoluble, sometimes the only thing we can do is be still for a moment, to remind ourselves what is real. The sun that rose this morning, the dirt under our feet, the air whispering in and out of our lungs. This hour, try just to be present in each moment as it unfolds. Your simple attention is what makes these moments holy. And I invite you to rise, embody your spirit for our first hymn. This is one we don't often sing, so Michael's going to play it through once, and it's short, so we're going to sing it twice. It's a meditative hymn based on the words of the Buddha.
While our chalice is lit by Elizabeth Stewart, our Vice President of the CUC Board of Trustees, please join me in reciting the words shown on the screen. We light this chalice to remind us of our dreams, to nourish our heart, mind, and spirit, to work towards a better world for all, to embrace the whole of our human experience, to honor our past and our gifts of the present, to create a community where each of us may find healing, transformation, and hope.
The story I bring to you this morning comes from writer and leadership expert Robin Sharma from his book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Peter was a young boy who could never live in the moment. When he was school, he dreamed of being outside playing. When he was outside playing, he dreamed of his summer vacation. Peter constantly daydreamed, never taking time to savor the special moments that filled his days. One morning, Peter was out walking in the forest near his home. Feeling tired, he decided to rest on a patch of grass and eventually dozed off. After only a few minutes of deep sleep, he heard someone calling his name. "Peter! Peter!" came the shrill voice from above. As he slowly opened his eyes, he was startled to see a striking woman standing above him. She must have been over 100 years old. Her snow-white hair dangled below her shoulders like a matted blanket of wool. In this woman's wrinkled hand was a magical little ball with a hole in the center, and out of the hole dangled a long golden thread. "Peter," she said, "this is the thread of your life. If you pull the thread just a bit, an hour will pass in seconds. If you pull the thread harder, full days will pass in minutes. And if you pull with all your might, months, even years will pass by in days." Peter was very excited about this new discovery. "I'd like to have it if I may," he asked. The elderly woman quickly reached down and gave the ball with the magic thread to the young boy. The next day, Peter was sitting in the classroom feeling restless and bored. Suddenly, he remembered his new toy. As he pulled a little bit on the golden thread, he quickly found himself playing in his garden. Realizing the power of the magic thread, Peter soon grew tired of being a schoolboy and longed to be a teenager with all the excitement that phase of life would bring. So again, he held the ball and pulled the golden thread. Suddenly, he was a teenager with a pretty partner named Elise, but Peter still wasn't content. He'd never learned to enjoy the moment and to explore the simple wonders of every stage of his life. Instead, have dreamed of being an adult. So again, he pulled the thread, and many years flew by in an instant. Now he found that he was transformed into a middle-aged adult. He had a spouse, and he was surrounded by a house full of kids. But Peter noticed something else. His once jet black hair had started to turn gray, and his once youthful mother, whom he loved dearly, had grown old and frail. Yet Peter could still not live in the moment. He never learned to live in the now. So once again, he pulled his magic thread and waited for the changes to appear. Peter found now that he was a 90-year-old man. His thick, dark hair had turned white as snow, and his beautiful spouse had also grown old and passed away a few years earlier. His wonderful children had grown up and left home to lead lives of their own. And for the first time in his entire life, Peter realized that he had not taken the time to embrace the wonders of living. He'd never gone fishing with his kids or taken a moonlight stroll with his spouse. He'd never planted a garden or read those wonderful books his mother had loved to read. Instead, he had hurried through life, never resting to see all the good along the way. Peter became very sad at this discovery. He decided to go out into the forest where he used to walk as a boy to clear his mind and warm his spirit. And as he entered the forest, he noticed the little saplings of his childhood had grown into mighty oaks. The forest itself had matured into a paradise of nature. He lay down in a small patch of grass and fell asleep into a deep slumber. After only a minute, he heard someone call out to him. "Peter, Peter," cried the voice. He looked up in astonishment to see that it was none other than the old woman who had given him the ball of magic thread all those many years earlier. "Have you enjoyed my special gift?" she asked. "At first it was fun," he said, "but now I hate it. My whole life has passed before my eyes without giving me the chance to enjoy it. Sure, there would have been sad times as well as great times, but I haven't had the chance to experience either. I feel empty inside, as if I've missed the gift of living." "You're very ungrateful," said the old woman. "Still, I will give you one last wish." "I'd like to go back to being a schoolboy and live my life over again," Peter quickly responded. He then returned to his sleep. Again, he heard someone calling his name and opened his eyes. Who could it be this time, he wondered. When he opened his eyes, he was absolutely delighted to see his mother standing by his bedside. She looked young and healthy and radiant. Peter realized that the strange woman from the forest had indeed granted his wish, and he returned to his former life. "Hurry up, Peter, you sleep too much. Your dreams will make you late for school if you don't get up right this minute," his mother admonished. Needless to say, Peter dashed out of bed and began life the way that he had hoped. He went to live a full life, one rich with many delights, joys, and triumphs. But it all started when he stopped sacrificing the present for the future and began to live in the moment.
We are not alone. Our lives are built on shared commitments, giving and receiving together. Our congregation serves as a place where we intentionally practice the shared living, interdependence in a culture that overemphasizes independence. One of the ways we practice our interdependence is through our congregation's finances, which depend on the generous contributions of members and friends. We pause each week to recognize this particular form of sharing, each of us giving what we can to support the mission and vision of Central Unitarian Church. Your financial contribution helps each and every one of us to grow, to serve, and most importantly, to live lives centered on love. Our offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you. Please join me in saying our dedication words based on CUC's mission statement. We dedicate these gifts in service of our mission to welcome all into a home of spiritual diversity that challenges us to become our best selves, to minister to one another in love, and to serve the greater community.
Now we enter into a time of meditation, sharing together the joys and sorrows of this community. This is something we do each week as a way of caring for each other. I have a few written joys and sorrows here that I will read out loud. I'll then read out loud any joys or sorrows for those of you online. So if you take a moment now to write your joys and sorrows in the chat, I will read those out loud. And then I'll turn back to this room and invite you to share out loud the name of anybody else you're holding in your heart this morning. Following that, we'll enter in a moment of silence, and then I'll lead us into a prayerful meditation, and we'll close out with a hymn. So let us take a breath together, breathing in a breath of life, breathing out a breath of love, as we share together the joys and sorrows of this community for today, Sunday, December 8th, 2024. I invite you to share out loud the name of anybody else you are holding in your heart this morning. Let us hold all these joys and all these sorrows, both those spoken and those that remain unspoken, together in our hearts with love as we enter into a moment of silence. And today, I offer a specific meditation practice as a form of prayer. This is a Buddhist practice called Tonglen, which is a Tibetan word for sending and receiving. We have a meditative hymn in our hymnal, which we'll sing again in a few moments. That's called Meditation on Breathing. In that hymn, if you recall, we breathe in peace and breathe out love. I said something similar as we were preparing for this meditative moment. It focuses solely on the goodness of this world. Tonglen is different. In Tonglen, you breathe in and receive what is unwanted in this world: suffering, pain, violence, and fear. And then you breathe out what you wish to share in this world: compassion, love, joy, and hope. And the very act of breathing in this practice connects you to suffering, whether it's your own or others, and then transforms that suffering through compassion. So I'll guide us through a simple practice of Tonglen now. This particular version comes from American Buddhist nun Pema Chodron. So let's begin by continuing to ground ourselves in the moment. If you're not already in a comfortable position on your seat, please do so with your back straight as you can and feet firmly on the ground. And simply focus first on your breathing in and out. And as you breathe, imagine yourself in a wide open space. Perhaps gazing out on the ocean or at the clear blue sky above. Whatever open space comes to your mind. Just take some time breathing out into that wide open space. Now, as you breathe in, imagine the air is hot and heavy and thick. Might even be a bit uncomfortable. Breathe in that hot air with your whole body. And as you exhale, breathe out the freshness of cool, light, bright energy. And radiate that outward. So inhale the hot, heavy air. And exhale the cool, bright, light air. In, out. Now bring to mind a specific person in your life who's suffering right now. And consider their source of suffering. Maybe pain or fear or anxiety. Think about that specific individual and breathe in their suffering. And breathe out compassion and healing to them. Spend some time with them now, breathing in and out. And now consider all those who are suffering from the same thing that your beloved that you've chosen suffers from, others who share the same illness or challenge. And breathe in all of their suffering. And breathe out your love for them. Taking in that suffering. And breathing out compassion, healing, and peace. Letting it radiate outward throughout the world. Spend some time with all of them now, breathing in and out. When you're ready, bring your attention back to yourself in the current moment. And offer yourself that same compassion that you've been breathing outward. That same love. Let it fill you. And as you're ready, open your eyes and just sit with how you're feeling in this moment. Blessed be. Amen. I invite you to remain seated as we do our traditional hymn, Meditation on Breathing. We'll sing the melody through twice, then we'll sing the drone, and then we'll sing the melody once more again. Brian will play the melody for us first.
Today's reading is entitled, What You Missed That Day You Were Absent from 4th Grade, by Brad Aaron Modlin. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you had forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks, and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy, the one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost, and one person add up to something.
Today, December 8th, is recognized in some schools of Buddhism as Bodhi Day, which is the day that the historical Buddha, Gautama Buddha, attained enlightenment. The Buddha lived in the 6th or 5th century BCE, and the Buddha taught the simple idea of recognizing that suffering exists in this world. And all beings suffer. But also, all beings can free themselves from suffering, which is what the Buddha called enlightenment. This is what the Buddha attained on this day. And enlightenment can be following the teachings of the Buddha. And as with any major religion, Buddhism has evolved into different schools and different teachings. The meditation that I shared earlier from Pema Chodron, she's a Buddhist nun, American Buddhist nun, who follows in a school of Tibetan Buddhism called Shambhala Buddhism. And that meditation came from a lovely little book she wrote called Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change. And in that book, she talks about 3 vows that she took as a nun and 3 vows that they teach their followers. The Pratimaska vow, which is the first vow, which is committing to not cause harm. The second vow, which is the Bodhisattva vow, committing to take care of one another. And the third vow, the Samaya vow, committing to embrace the world as it is. These vows are deeply simple, like the lessons from Mrs. Nelson's 4th grade class that we heard in that very tongue-in-cheek poem that Josef led. And similar to those lessons, even though they are simple, they can lead to a deeper and richer life. And as our reading suggested, if those lessons were taught to all of us at a very young age, the world might be a different place. The first vow, committing to not cause harm, builds mindfulness about yourself, about your actions, and your place in the interconnected web of life. The second vow, committing not to cause harm, builds mindfulness about yourself. The second vow, committing to take care of one another, builds on the first, deepening your mindfulness and your action in the world, helping you understand that you can play a part in alleviating the suffering for you and others. And that starts with wanting to alleviate that suffering. Now, the third vow, committing to embrace the world just as it is, proves to be the hardest. And it cannot be truly practiced without first practicing the initial 2 vows. Because it forces you to embrace the world and confront the world in all of its complexity. The sorrow as well as the joy, the pain as well as the pleasure, the violence as well as the peace, the hatred as well as the love. Remaining attuned to this living world, we observe that there are no singularities or binaries that we find in nature. The universe instead comprises rich diversity and complexity. We can't just pull on a golden thread like Peter in our story and skip what we don't like, because we miss something vital if we do. Being present, not living for the future or the past, but living in the moment means fully embracing the whole world in both its beauty and its brokenness. The practice of Tonglen, which we used earlier as a meditation, can be a bridge between the second and third vows. Because by confronting the realities of this world, you're also practicing to transform some of those harmful realities into acts of care and compassion. And Pema Chodron gives a more extreme example of practicing the third vow. In Tibet, the ground is frozen during much of the year. It's a very high elevation. And when people die, they cannot bury the bodies because the ground is frozen. So instead, they are taken to charnel grounds where birds of prey assist in the process of decomposition. As she writes, the charnel ground is a grisly place, hardly somewhere we'd want to hang out. But she talks about brave meditators practice staying awake and attentive under such conditions. This is a place where those practicing this third vow will sit and meditate. And from the perspective of a charnel ground practice, she says, the chaos of our lives isn't terrible. It's simply the material we work with. She continues, we begin with the understanding that we can't experience profound well-being without working with, not against, the gritty realities of life. She cautions that this is an advanced practice and it's not to be done without guidance and without the foundation of the other trainings. And she also cautions that one doesn't undergo this practice all at once. One approaches it in short, tiny moments again and again. Now, to be clear, this isn't a practice about normalizing all of the harmful suffering in the world. It's not about resigning ourselves to the horrors of the world and doing nothing about them. It's about fully realizing and accepting the horrors of the world so that we can remain present even within those challenging situations. And in doing so, we also learn to let go of notions, ideas, and mental models that we've picked up to obscure our reality of our world. To give one example that's outside of Buddhism, of accepting the world as it is, you could look at James Baldwin, who was writing about his own process of acceptance in a 1955 essay called Notes of a Native Son, where he begins to realize the real existence and impact of racism on him and the people around him. He writes, it would begin to seem that one would have to hold in mind forever two ideas that seemed in opposition. The first idea was acceptance, the acceptance totally without rancor of life as it is, of men as they are. And in light of this idea, it goes without saying that injustice is commonplace. But this does not mean that one can be complacent, for the second idea was of equal power, that one must never in one's life accept these injustices as commonplace and must fight them with all of one's strength. This fight begins, however, in the heart. And now it had been laid in my charge to keep my own heart free of hatred and despair. One thing I want to point out about Baldwin's quote and also about this Tonglen practice and other approaches, especially the Buddhist approaches, is notice it's not just an intellectual approach. It is the head and the heart and the spirit together. Western science is beginning to catch up as neuroscientists are reminding us over and over again in a variety of ways, and sociologists too, like Brene Brown, reminding us that we are not thinking machines that feel, but we're actually feeling beings that think. And in a lot of Eastern traditions, especially in a lot of Buddhism, there is no separation of thoughts and emotions into separate, distinct areas like we do in the West. All of those are one. All of those are part of you. And so when you are meditating and contemplating the world as it is, this isn't just an intellectual exercise, it is also about the heart. And as you hear Baldwin saying in his essay, being aware of what's there and not letting it rip your heart apart. It's how you can transform it into something new. I first discovered these Buddhist concepts of acceptance in my early 20s. It was just some of the basic concept of accepting the world as it is. And it wasn't until 20 years later that I discovered Shodron's book, including that Tonglen meditation and the idea of the charnel ground practice. I discovered them during seminary while I was completing an internship as an interfaith chaplain in a major hospital. Practicing to breathe in the pain and suffering for those I visited, as well as all the patients in the hospital, kept me grounded and present during 48-hour overnight shifts I was required to complete. I had a dorm room where you could stay for those shifts, and I would sit in that dorm room late at night, anxious about the idea of my pager going off and wondering what situation would present itself. And such practices brought me calm and peace in the face of these gritty realities, because I knew that somewhere, someone, more than someone, was suffering in this hospital, even if I wasn't with them. And then there were the extreme moments that these practices helped me through. On one single night, I sat with a woman as her husband died after being disconnected from life support. A few hours later, I sat with a mother and her daughter who had just died of suicide, followed by sitting almost all night into the early hours with a young couple in the pediatric ICU as their 3-year-old daughter, who was the same age at that time as my son, fought for her life. My job as a chaplain was to be present in each of those situations, and there was nothing that I could say in any of those traumatic situations that could change them. I couldn't bring anyone back from the dead. I couldn't physically heal anyone who was at the brink of death. I couldn't take away anybody's gut-wrenching anguish, and I couldn't pretend any of those things were not happening. Denial was not an option. But I could breathe in all that pain and suffering, and I could breathe out love and compassion. Such practices brought some level of comfort to my patients and certainly helped me with my own well-being. These practices also taught me that I needed to let go of my own privileged idea of safety and security, because part of what made each of these situations so arresting is that they can happen to any of us. I could see myself and my beloveds in every single one of those situations. These are powerful practices. To truly and honestly embrace the world as it is in all of its beauty and all of its brokenness, we have to lean toward our emotions and remain open and curious instead of reactive. And part of the reason why I bring these forth today is because as I look at the news of this week and the last few months, I feel that now is the time for more of us to take up these practices. As we're confronting the stark realities of our world, especially the violence we are capable of inflicting on each other and on our planet. Take as just one example from our news headlines and our local news. The fights happening all over the country for books, book bans, and school curriculum. At the center of these fights are the realities of racism and gender diversity. To remove these things from our schools and as a way of, quote, protecting our children doesn't make these realities go away. To say these topics teach our children to hate our country or to hate themselves is just another form of denying that these realities exist. We can love our country and celebrate its history while also acknowledging the very real violence, hatred, and injustice that exists in our history and continues today. Teaching about diversity of gender and sexuality, for example, as we have done in UU congregations for decades, helps our children better understand themselves and their classmates instead of denying the existence of such diversity. Yet, these fights continue with denial of reality existing on all sides. Just one example, out near me in Westchester, there's a school system that's been teaching a half an hour gender lesson across grade levels for a number of years. Just a half an hour lesson every year, and it includes definition of what it means to be transgender, cisgender, and non-binary. The week before Thanksgiving, a right-wing conservative TikTok account began to attack the school, focusing personally on staff members and the administration in the district. The attacks caught on. Fox News reported on what the school was doing. The school received an overwhelming amount of complaints, hatred, and threats. They had to remove all the information from their website and social media account to protect themselves. They had to put the school on high alert, keeping children indoors and canceling all after-school activities. All of this because of a 30-minute gender lesson once a year. Such events are happening all over the country, including here in New Jersey. Now, in the case of Westchester, as in many places, there's a groundswell of support for the curriculum. And within those circles of support, as people process their reaction, there's often a shock. Oh, how can this happen in our hometown? We need to let go of the idea that these things can't happen in our own communities, no matter where we live. Hatred and oppression exists everywhere. To embrace the world as it is means to acknowledge that racism, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, ableism, ageism, and other oppressions are woven into the very fabric of our lives. And while some of us feel these forces more than others, it doesn't mean that they're not there. Collectively, we need to put down the surprise about these violences and our lack of safety. The world is a violent place, and some of us don't have the privilege of pretending that we have safety and security. We breathe in and we breathe out. Another way we deny the reality of the world on the progressive left is pretending that we're going to be able to pay attention to all these things all at once and always get it right and always agree with one another. We're going to mess up. We're going to hurt each other. But when we insist on getting everything right all the time and paying attention to all these things, that's where the awareness and mindfulness of the oppressions in this world devolves into an identity politics that in and of themselves become a form of oppression. So yes, we need to embrace the world as it is. And yes, that means building our awareness of the forces in the world that cause harm so that we can change our behaviors and stop causing harm to ourselves and care for each other. But it also means approaching such a world with compassion and with grace. We can breathe in all of those things, and we can breathe out love and understanding and grace. Another example from our headlines is the shooting of Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. This shooting is chilling, and it calls for our attention and care. But so do the voices who are using his killing to highlight the deadly brokenness of our current healthcare system, which is designed to focus on profit and well-being. Each day, this greedy and indifferent system delivers life and death choices that are equally chilling. And both of these are realities. We can choose to argue one over the other. We can choose to ignore one or the other. We can choose to argue about the morality of one versus the other, but both are a reality. We can breathe in those things, and we can breathe out. Now, such practices and acceptance are not about wallowing in the pain and suffering of the world. That's not what I'm talking about this morning. Instead, it's a way of ensuring that we don't avoid them, that we don't pretend that they're not there, and that we care for ourselves and each other. They allow us to actively engage in the rough edges of our broken world as a way of caring for each other, caring for ourselves, and ceasing the cycles of harm that we are so good as human beings in perpetuating against each other. They're not the only practices we can use, but we need practices like these if we're going to navigate the immense uncertainty and change that lie ahead for all of us. We need the awareness and the compassion that they cultivate. And so, on this Bodhi day, using the example of the Buddha who reached enlightenment, may we continue to learn from and practice these approaches together and teach them to our children as we breathe in, as we breathe out, and as we live more fully into the present and embrace the immense beauty of our blessed and broken world.
As we extinguish this chalice flame, let us read the words printed for you. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not our promise to each other, to act with grace, to hold each other in love, to serve this community and our world. May it bring joy to our collective lives.
Please rise and embody your spirit for our closing hymn, May filled with loving kindness. Our closing words come from the classical Indian writer Kalidasa. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course, live all varieties and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of achievement are but experiences of time. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. And today well lived makes yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Such is the salutation to the ever new dawn. Blessed be. Amen. Thank you, Michael, for the lovely music today. Thank you for Joseph for being our worship associate. Thank you to John and Phil for being in our tech. We